This video is for Digital Society students and teachers who are preparing for the IB Diploma Program exams, and it's a deep dive into the short answer questions for papers 1, 2, and 3. In particular, mostly it's like 2-mark questions, but you could also incorporate 1, 2, and 3-mark questions. It's all the same kind of tactics. Now, if you go to this website here, ibdigitalsociety.com, the latest blog post that I've created is entitled IBDP Digital Society Papers 1, 2, and 3, 2-mark and 3-mark question analysis and student guide. So about the process, I have a batch of exam papers that have been marked by examiners. Basically, what I wanted to do is work out what does it take to get full marks for each question in the exam room. And as a result of that, I've come up with a list of do's and don'ts, basically. Now, the process I tried to do this with my own brain, and I felt a lot of limitations. So I enlisted the help of AI, and basically I fed lots of exam questions, only the 2-mark and 3-mark questions, into an AI tool and asked them to look for certain patterns and to help me basically reverse engineer to work out what do the examiners actually want. What are they looking for with the 2-mark, 3-mark questions? And here is the result. So first of all, students, when you're asked, one of the key things is to decode. If it's worth 2 marks, you've basically got to provide 2 reasons or 2 points so that the examiners can give you 2 ticks. So if it's worth 3 marks, you should be giving 3 distinct items that the examiners can tick. So constantly be thinking about this from the examiner's perspective. What do the examiners actually want? If you start thinking it from that angle, you're on the right track. So common success patterns. So when there's a 2-mark question, if students actually give 2 points and they're clearly separate points, they get 2 marks. The next one, for the 3-mark question, sometimes there's an explain. So you may give your explanation, but if you could link then to an example, the example could be another reason to get a tick. So just when you're writing your exam, just if you're doing it in bullet points, or just make this distinct 2 reasons, two pieces of information that are tick worthy, or 3 pieces of information that are tick worthy, you're on the right track. Now, timing is important. So make sure with these 2-mark questions, don't waste too much time, but make sure you do directly respond to the command term. There's no need for these questions to rewrite questions or do any lengthy explanations. Just get straight to the point. These are actually designed for quick recall. So identify whatever the question might be. Maybe something connected with the source. We're just looking for some quick, sharp, to the point information. Precise terminology. So this is one of the overarching themes of all Group 3 subjects, that you use the right terminology. You're not calling a piece of technology a thing. You actually name it, and you put it in a sentence where it actually makes sense. This demonstrates that you can use terminology. You have the terminology, and you can use it in the right kind of sentence, in the right way. Now, one thing, I would thoroughly recommend getting your hands on the textbook. Now, the main reason is the people who write the textbook are the people who mark your exam as well. So if you've got the textbook, just look for, if you're flipping through the Digital Society textbook, look for anything that's in bold. There's a lot of bold parts. That's how you can, they're the kind of, that's the terminology that the textbook writers, the people who created the course, want you to know. So they're the kind of themes that should be popping up in the exam questions. Bullet points and lists. Just to remember, just think about your examiner. They want to whiz through and mark your exams quite swiftly and quickly. So if you've got some numbers, lists, or bullet points, it makes it easy for them, and you're getting straight to the point. It also crafts the way you respond as well. This is not a grammar test. This is not an English test, or this is a Digital Society test. Get straight to the point. Don't waste any time and energy on superfluous words. Now, quite common is when you're asked an exam question, it says with reference to the source, and there's some kind of a source provided. If it says that, make sure you reference the source. Find something from the source that you can actually put in your response. Now, this reminds me of another tactic or tip, is that when you're reading the question, I would thoroughly recommend highlighting certain words. So if it says with reference to the source, underline reference to the source. So you physically doing that will help you remember, I've got to actually do that. And then also the other one is identify the key command term. Identify, underline it. With reference to source, underline it. Advantages, disadvantages, or characteristics. Okay, they're the key words there. Something about AI, or a GPS. So get in the habit of underlining the keywords when you're reading the question. So when you respond with your bullet points or your numbers, you can link straight to those underlined words, and it decreases the chance of you missing something. Now, also, when you get to the end of your exam, another really, really good practice is just do the proofread. Now, what happens when you're sitting in the exam room, you're going from question 1 to question 2 to question 3, and your brain is going on this journey, and your brain's getting a bit tired as well. At the end of the exam, if you're going to allocate yourself 5 or 10 minutes to just go back and revise things, when you revise things, you've got somewhat fresh eyes, but you've got a tired brain. But if with your fresh eyes, you might see those key points that you've underlined, and you think, oh, I'm supposed to explain here. Did I actually explain? No, I better add a few more words. Oh, with reference to source, I forgot that part. I better add that in now. So your underlining of the key words will help you when you do your review at the end of the exam. Now, the other thing about decoding some questions, when you've got a question, sometimes they don't make the context or content they often make obvious, but the context they may not. So if it's in reference to, say, the context of health, so perhaps in the source, there's something about health apps. So you're thinking, okay, the context is health. That's from the 3 C's. And the health apps, so that's apps, that's technology, there's probably data as well. So when you're reading the question, try to actually pinpoint where on the 3 C's this question is coming from. Because this is the mindset you need to have. So if there's an exam question written, basically the examiners want a certain response. So they're looking for a certain response. And if you respond the way they want you to, you're going to get top marks. So if something to do with health, but you start talking about business, it's like, they're a little bit off track. I can't give them a mark because they're talking about business, but this question's clearly about health. So keep the 3 C's constantly in mind, and every time you read a question, think about, now, which of the 3 C's is the examiner referring to, and which one do they want me to, or which one do they want me to actually talk about? Okay, common failure patterns. Okay, sometimes people are a bit too rushed for time and they spit out an answer, but that doesn't fully make sense. Now, just be aware, your examiner's going to be reading your exam paper. They don't know you, your context, what's going on in your brain. All they can judge your response on is what's written on the page. So this is one of the problems when you're under pressure in the exam room. You're writing a response. In your brain, you know what the answer is. You know all about it, but your words didn't fully explain, didn't really communicate it very clearly. Now, one little practice I think you should get yourself into is if there's a technical term, and I'll return to the GPS, GIS. In your brain, you might kind of know how it works. You know what GPS is. You know what GIS is. And so you quickly write down your answer. But the thing is, if somebody else is reading this and they don't understand it, you're not going to get your full marks. So think of it this way. Somebody's asking you about GPS, GIS, or whatever kind of digital technology. They want you to explain it because they don't know. So imagine your mum says to you, what is GPS? And you've got to explain it in a way that your mum understands. What is GIS? Explain it so your mum understands. So you're not explaining it because you already know what it is, but you're explaining it for a third party. So your written responses should be understood by a third party, and they then understand whatever the focus of the question is. So think about the audience. When you're writing, think about the audience. Okay, sometimes people, when there's a 2-mark question, they have 2 points, but they're basically the same thing. So just be aware that when you're writing responses, there should be 2 distinct different things, different reasons. So if it asks for an example and you give one example and then it's the same example written differently, you're not going to get full marks. It needs to be a different example. So be sure that your points, when you're writing the 2 or 3 mark question, each point is different and it's a mark. It's worth a mark. Some people waste too much time over explaining. These 2 mark questions are at the start of the exam. Get them finished, move on. Don't use all your brain power and all your grammar and lovely prose all wasted on these 2 mark questions. Write your short response, make sure it's clear, concise, and then move on. Under explain, I've kind of talked a bit about this with reference to vague and incomplete answers, but yeah, sometimes people are a little bit rushed with time or their brain is a bit fatigued. But remember, you're trying to write so that a third party understands. The next one is mixing up similar contexts. So I've used the example of GPS, GIS. Sometimes people don't know the difference there. They think they know, but they don't really know. So they start explaining satellite systems and mapping and locations. It's like you haven't really specified exactly what a GPS does or a GIS does. What does it actually do? You haven't really explained it properly. You've kind of mixed up GPS and you've kind of mixed up GIS. From the examiner's perspective, you don't really know. I can't give you any marks. So that's about the mixing up similar concepts. Often the question will ask, with reference to the source material, make sure you mention the source material. Okay, this next bullet point, confusing the context, here's the classic GPS example. But the main thing is, if you're kind of babbling on a little bit, the examiners know. It's like they're kind of talking about in your car, driving, and maps and locations and speeds, but they don't really know exactly what a GPS and a GIS does. They're kind of confusing it all, muddling it up. So just be aware. Don't just write garbage. Try to get some bullet points down. Like what is GPS? Do your best to understand. Now, one other thing is, one cheeky little way, and I know students have done this in the past, is if you're not sure, there's times you're going to have a guess. Now, the best way to have a guess is just deconstruct the words. So yesterday I was teaching something about obsolescence, technology and obsolescence. And you think, obsolescence, what's that? Oh, it comes from the word obsolete. Now, what does obsolete mean? Now, what does that mean in a technology context? Another example is when you talk about the concept change. Now, there's some distinct differences with change. There's things like transformation and there's adaptation. Now, if you think of the word transformation, it's like, transformation, what is that? I know the Transformers movie. Okay, Transformers movies goes from one shape to a complete different thing. So they completely transform. Okay, that must be what the word means. Now, what's that mean in a digital context? So just if you need to guess, just break apart the words and do your best. Remember, the examiners are they're trained to do positive marking. So if they see that you've got a right answer or it's on the right track, they'll give you a tick. If it's a wrong answer, they don't mark it, they don't deduct points. So if you write down something that's incorrect, you don't lose marks. You only get marks when you get the right thing. So it's worth just having a go at everything and just doing your best. And if you're really stuck, just break apart the words, think about the words from a different angle and just do your best that way. Now, this one here, incomplete reasoning change in the 3-mark question. If it's a 3-mark question, and I might just go back to something here. I've got here the command terms. Now, let's just give an example. So if it's something like outline, give a brief, account, or summary, this is usually, an outline is like a step by step by step. Outline how a digital camera takes a photo. Outline how a chatbot works. And you might talk about step 1 is you input a query. Step 2, the processing part, which is when the AI tool does its magic. Maybe it's transparent, like something like Perplexity, or maybe it's a black box and hidden. We don't know about the processing. And then the third step is the output, the response. So I've clearly identified 3 distinct steps there. So some people just kind of, you type into the chatbot and then an answer comes. And it's like, well, you've missed a couple of steps there. I can't give you 3 marks for that. So outline is quite a common one for 3-mark questions. Where was I? Yeah, outline is a common one for 3-mark questions. So be aware, if you're doing the outline, it's usually a step-by-step process. And always keep that in mind. When it comes to technology, if you're stuck and you're not sure about the answer, there's input, there's processing, and then there's output. So keep that in mind if you're ever stuck and you're not quite sure about a response. Again, the last point is just giving generic answers. So you might just talk about some kind of technology that you like, but you haven't exactly answered the question. So again, this goes back to my tips on underlining the keywords. So you might have a statement and it's 100% correct, but you didn't answer the question. So remember, it's really, really, really important that you understand the question. Think about now, how does the examiner want me to actually respond? Have I responded to that? That's the way to get your full marks, and you don't fall for the trap of just providing a generic answer. Okay, here's a list of do's. I've already talked about the command terms, how important the command terms are. Structuring, we've already talked about that. So if these questions are great for numbers or bullet points. Be specific. Remember, the examiners are looking for you to use precise terminology, subject-specific terminology. So be sure you do that when you're writing your responses. Check question requirements. So read the question, underline the keywords, read it again after you've finished answering to make sure you've done everything, and then read it again at the end of the exam when you're doing your review. Read the question, understand the question. Now, the other thing, Digital Society loves real-world examples. Now, this is also a way to demonstrate your depth of understanding. If the exam question is asking something about digital divide, and I explain digital divide is about some people having access to technology and another group having less access to technology. And an example of this would be in New York, people have decent internet connectivity and access to a lot of tech tools compared to somewhere in Central Australia. They don't have access to internet coverage. So this illustrates, this kind of example of New York City to Central Australia gives an example of a digital divide, people having access to technology or network coverage, and how people who have less access could potentially miss out on opportunities, job opportunities, accessing information, accessing healthcare compared to another place which has good access to technology. So I've explained the digital divide and I've linked it to an example, a real world example. Okay, the don't list. Don't provide generic answers. If you're just saying computer rather than a laptop or a desktop or a smartphone, so remember, subject specific terminology. So use the correct word whenever you can. This one we've already talked about. Don't repeat the same subject. So if you talk about, if the question's about output devices and you talk about speakers and then you talk about the sound system, you're saying the same thing. You're not going to get marks. So if it's asking for outputs, be very specific that your 2 outputs are different output devices. Okay, sometimes, again, I feel like a broken record. I keep repeating about reading the question. Sometimes the question says what not to talk about, so be sure you pay attention to that. Don't over elaborate. Time is of the essence in the exam room. Don't waste too much time with big long paragraphs for the 2-mark, 3-mark questions. Get to the point. So sometimes the people are too brief and they don't explain themselves, and therefore the examiner's thinking, I don't know if they really understand this. They've just written 2 words. I don't know if they really understand it. So adding a few extra words to demonstrate your knowledge is really imperative, but not using too many words. So we've got to get the right balance here. So this next section is focusing on some actual exam questions, and there's an emphasis on different command terms. So what I'm trying to demonstrate here, or what I'm trying to explain or teach you, is that look for the command term, because the command term warrants a specific response. So being able to understand, if a question says identify, what kind of an answer am I supposed to give? If the question asks to define, what am I trying to give? State, what does that one mean? Describe is another one. Outline, we've already talked about outline. Explain. Okay, so they're the different command terms. So it's really important that you understand the different command terms and how to respond. Now, this guide here also talks about, mainly about the thinking process. So what I'd recommend that you do, practice answering the first question, and then check to see if you are on the right track. So there's the command term focus, and then there's a strategy. So what we're talking about in this video are strategies for success. Now, this is one of the big issues with digital society students and students in general. They may have tons of information in their head, but they're using the wrong strategies in the exam room. So this blog is about having the right exam room strategies for the 2 and the 3 mark questions. So there I've got each command term with the questions, with the command term, how they want you to respond, a response strategy, a good answer and a bad answer, or a poor answer. So you can work through those on your own. Okay, to conclude, I'm going to talk about final success strategy. So first of all, the 2-point test. Before you submit, so this is more about, keep this in mind when you're responding, but this is often the review at the end of the exam. So at the end, if it's a 2-mark question, ask yourself, have I actually given 2 distinct points that are worth a mark each? Ask yourself, are my 2 points actually different, or because I'm avoiding trying to write the same thing twice? Point 3, would someone unfamiliar with the topic understand what I mean? This is the idea of explaining something for your grandma, explaining something for your little brother. How does this technology work? I'm going to explain it to you so you understand. And using the subject-specific technical terms, the correct words, is very important. So this is your review at the end. For the 3-mark questions, have I explained how, what, why? What was the context given in this question? Have I actually responded to the correct 3 C's? Now, whatever the examiner wants me to respond to, I'm actually identifying the correct 3C. Now, point 3 is about cause and effect. Now, that specifically talks about explain. Explain, the explain command term is looking for you to showing reasoning, detailed reasoning showing cause and effect. So use words, things like because, therefore, this means. So there's a cause and then there's an effect. And that actually covers the next point as well, point 4. So you're giving the cause and effect, but you're also showing the reasoning for it as well. Okay, time management. Here is some tips. 2 to 3 minutes for your 2-mark question, 4 to 5 minutes for the 3-mark question. Now, the last tip here is don't overthink. Now, I understand there's plenty of people who are under a lot of pressure in the exam. They want to get to a certain university and they need to get a certain mark, or they're just trying to get the best mark possible. So they put themselves under a ton of pressure. They're not thinking straight. They're overthinking. They're suffering some anxiety. So this is to try and, so it's a bullet point, and it's easier said than done. But in the exam room, take a few deep breaths if you need to, because you're sitting in the exam room for a long time. If you need to, shut your eyes for a bit, take some deep breaths, look at the exam question again with some fresh eyes. What's the first thing that pops into your brain? Write that down, move on to the next one. Because then you may have some bit of time to come back and look at this one later. But don't overthink it. Sometimes people do overthink it, and they think, oh, examiner wants this. Oh, hang on, my teacher said this. Hang on, my friend said this. And the textbook said this. And they get themselves all muddled up and confused. Have a little bit of confidence. You've finished a 2-year course. You know digital society. You've done some exam practice. Take some deep breaths, trust your judgment, write the answer, move on. Now, keeping this in mind will allow you a little bit of extra time, hopefully at the end, where you can come back and review some of these questions. But remember, these are the 2 and 3 mark strategies. Don't overthink these. These are short, sharp answers, short, sharp, concise, to the point answers. Now, this last point, practice techniques. Now, with AI, it's really handy now. You can actually get AI tools to write you some practice exam questions, so whatever the topic might be. So I recommend you asking some AI tools to write you some 2-mark questions, and you can do this no matter in any of the 3 C's, whatever it might be. It's like, here is the content, so you can feed into the AI tool. Here is the Digital Society syllabus. These are the main areas of field of study in something like robotics and autonomous technology. So you can copy and paste that, put it into the AI tool and say, can you write 10, 20 questions, 2-mark questions using the AO1, that is Assessment Objective 1, the AO1 command terms. Write me 20 questions for me to practice. And then you can practice the answers, and then you can also get AI to check your answers. Now, for something more precise too, you can even feed this into the AI tool as well and saying, these are the things I'm trying to achieve with my answers. So ask the AI tool to write you some questions, practice answering, write all the answers. And again, I'm doing the hand gesture of writing. At this point in time, you still have to do written exams, so practice writing answers, And I'd even recommend, once you've got your 10, 20 questions, print them out or write them out. Write them out yourself, and while you're writing them out, underline the key words, answer it. Because when you're writing it too, you start to think. Write them out, underline, keywords, write your answer, write the next one. Or you just print it, and then you can underline the keywords. Now, once you've finished writing your answers to all the questions, feed that back into the AI tool and say, can you please assess my responses? But you can also feed things from this here and say, please assess, but keep in mind, this is what I'm aiming for. This is the guide for success. Can you check to see if I'm on track? And you can get the AI tool to answer things, do the marking for you. So this is an excellent study guide or way to use AI as your personal tutor. Anyway, I hope this helps. I hope you have some really good success when it comes to answering the 2-mark and 3-mark questions on your IB exam.